what is magic? So we're going to have some simple definitions to journey together with, and I'm all about these definitions growing and mushrooming in our minds and hearts. So I'm cool with that. The simple definition we're starting with tonight is basically what the other slide said. Magic, well, let's say this: magic is anything that is unusual to daily activity, daily discourse. Things that you don't see regularly. It's the reason why people watch television or watch movies, to see fantastic feats of, fighting skills and gun battles and things of that nature. There was a time that people talked about Hollywood as making magic. There used to be more words in our daily discourse that were magical and enchanting, but we may have gotten a little jaded by now, since we have access 24 hours a day to whatever we want to see. However, magic is something you just don't see every day, and it may be hard for you to explain. So that's the definition we're going to start with, but as we keep journeying, it's going to grow too. I talked about resistance. So what is resistance? I mean, if you ask me, it's a real nice word to say people saying no, people who are not going to be pushed over anymore or treated badly or dogged out. When we talk about decolonial systems and fighting oppression, when we talk about Martin Luther King, we're talking about an icon, someone who led other people and stood up on camera to be the face of a movement and said, no more. We're going to be treated equally and fairly, or you're going to expose this ugliness that you're giving to us to the world. That's what we're going to do. We're not going to sit down and take it no more. For purposes of this discussion, it's a personal thing. It could be something you decide to do to resist any kind of oppression you see put on you or someone else. It can be communal. It could be the time that your family leaves a restaurant because you sat there and seen other people waited on and they didn't wait on you. So you and your partner or you and your family get up and leave. So it's not just you. It could be a private thing where you donate money to somebody who's just suffered through a horrific event that was based on their religion or their gender or the color of their skin or some reason that in your heart is wrong. You don't treat people that way. So it could be a private form of resistance. No one knows you helped this person but you. And it can also be very public. Like I said, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, people who literally put their lives on the line for something that many people standing behind them believe in, including themselves. That is going to be our definition for moving through tonight. And I want to say that as I name these people to you that you maybe didn't hear of or you don't know much about, remember this, if you can, hold on to this idea rather, that resistance isn't just the big giant marches on Washington and, the big sit-ins and the things that get a lot of public attention and is written about in history books and the things about. Resistance are a million different decisions made over a long time by many different people, mostly unnamed, who simply decided to say no to something. It could be as simple as not complying with an unfair directive from a supervisor that is unfairly given based on hurting someone else because of their color or race or gender or sexual orientation. It doesn't have to be a big giant newspaper moment or in these days a website moment. It can be something small, because by the time you see Martin Luther King marching, there are thousands of different activities behind him that put him up front. He didn't just hop out of bed one day and say, here I am. So keep in mind, these actions all count, even the one you make tomorrow to pay for someone's coffee who don't have money for coffee. Just think about that. Oppression also includes classism in this discussion. So it's not just color, it's also intersectional. It could be poverty and things like that. That's another form of oppression, since most poverty is not self-induced, but there's a systemic sense of poverty. So for more on that, read about Martin Luther King and his talks, his speeches about the poor. Okay, what is magic? Our definition tonight is magic is a miracle that religion hasn't claimed yet. Flip side of what I said before. And let's get into that a little bit more. So the language of magic is a language of resistance. We hear words like conjure, we hear tricks, we hear black magic. There was a time not too long ago in my memory when there was an expression in America where someone would say, oh, if someone was pretty slick or they were clever, they would say, oh, he has that old black magic. And it wasn't attached to a particular color, but we know it came out of describing people of a particular color. And there's songs about it. I wanted to put some songs together for y'all tonight, a playlist, and didn't have time to do that, nor would we have time to hear it. But it's something that I will put together and put out on my mailing list. There are songs in the Black community about supernatural. Your love is supernatural. You put a spell on me, or I put a spell on you, rather, Screaming Jay Hawkins. Charm, someone is charming. All those words at one point would have had someone burned at the stake in parts of America and Europe. To charm someone is to kind of bewitch them and to enchant them. So these are words we don't really think about a lot, maybe, unless you hear conjure. And there's words that also cross over into street life. So when we look at people in the sporting life, they may talk about, this woman is going to turn a trick, something of that nature, when they're talking about sex workers. So when we talk about the words around magic, just pay attention to what you think they mean and what they mean to you, and maybe your experience of them as we go on tonight. So, okay, let's center this discussion because I have a lot to say and I'm taking a long time. Okay, we're going to center this in Western European history and culture, meaning I'm going to talk to you about magic as it happens in America and has happened in America for about 300 years now, give or take a few years. And that comes out of a Western European tradition. The foundational ethics of it are going to be Christian thought. A little Islamic influence, but still we're talking Abrahamic religion, okay? That's the basis of this conversation. It is viewed through the lens of Africana cosmology. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but Africana cosmology is a theory, a philosophical process that was revealed to me in my master's degree program that I have espoused for many years now. And it is a way of looking at the healing traditions of Africana people around the world. The magicians we're going to discuss practice in Europe and the USA, which is very curious for different reasons that'll come up later. So you may be thinking, if I'm talking about resistant oppression and resistance and decolonialization, and you saw the entrance to this program, what about magic in Africa and Asia? Why am I talking about magic out of Western Europe? Because, well, basically the tradition of magic in America comes out of that framework of thinking. But why don't I talk about magic in the Americas before the arrival of colonists from Europe? And I'll give you a real quick answer, because there was no such thing, no such conceptual idea of magic in Africa, let's say pre-colonial Africa. The things I'm talking to you about tonight, the stage performances and things like that, are shaped by our understanding of what God wants, what religion has told us that God wants. Even if you're an atheist, even if you're Buddhist, even if you don't believe in nothing but yourself, this country, even the holidays on your calendar, the bank is closed on Christmas. If you don't believe it's Christmas, it really don't matter because the bank ain't opening for you. So this country is set up around certain ethical ideas that come out of their interpretation of Christianity, okay? That's filtered through Europe. And that's very important to know. Now you say, but wait a minute, what about all the fantastic things in Africa? Yeah, there's a lot of fantastic things, but they weren't seen as magical. They were part and parcel of a tradition that expected, embraced, and dealt with the unexpected very differently. We're talking about interacting with ancestors. When people die, they don't just leave and go and fly around somewhere until Judgment Day. Those ideas come out of a Judeo-Christian ethics, just ethos, a whole that was introduced to different parts of the continent at different times. So if you want to know more about this idea because you're raging there was a wonderful conference in 2022 in April, and there was a dynamic speaker there named Kofi Abimbola, Dr. Kofi Abimbola. He teaches at Howard University. He was a keynote speaker, and the name of this conference is I Put a Spell on You. And I was a presenter there, a co-presenter with him. And he is a native of Nigeria, from the Oyo area of Nigeria. And he went ahead and gave this a lot more time than I can give it tonight, where the title of the conference and the conceptualization was based around the idea that these different fantastic things like raising the dead or turning water into wine or any number of things were fantastic and unusual and supernatural, where there are people within his community that were able to do these things, and they have been done for centuries. So my point is, what's happening in Asia, I can talk about Chinese mysticism and what the Westerners call witchcraft, but again, we're talking outside of a Christian context. So we don't have a devil and a God battling each other and all that. So when you talk about magic tonight, we're really talking about our own little piece of the world and the way we've been indoctrinated to see it based on the religious ideas that are infused in our culture. And feel free to ask questions about that later if you are so inclined. So, okay, history. In Kemet, commonly known as Egypt, magic was well known and was not used for amusement. I could say a lot more about that. So just like that little box that you pull out of your pocket and you plug it in at night, and when you want to see someone, you talk into it, you would have been put in an insane asylum 100 years ago, unless you had a few friends who could hear that, but we call them smartphones, right? So my point is that I'm talking to a screen, and if someone opened this door, there's no one in here with me. I'm talking to the air. A lot of our modern science appears as magic. I mean, just barely. When your great-grandparents were in diapers, you would have been considered crazy. So in Kemet, magic had a purpose. You could think of it as medicinal in some ways. There wasn't a sense of amusing people like the Michael Jackson video where Eddie Murphy's there and Iman, and she's bored and she says, bring out the jesters and all that. And when Michael Jackson comes out, he makes himself disappear. Great video, by the way, you ought to check it out. But the point is, amusement is not what this was about in many communities around the world, communities of color. It was reserved for very special reasons and to heal people of what we might be considering psychiatric or psychological things. And you can look at ancient Samaria for that and Mesopotamian texts, and I would love to answer your questions about that if you're interested. So we're going to begin our discussion from a well-known incident in Kemet. But first, why are we talking about Egypt? Because the Western civilization considers this lineage: Egypt to Greece, Greece to Rome, Rome to the rest of Europe. So that's the ancestral, I guess, political and social and cultural ancestral lineage that America considers itself a part of. So we really can't talk about African-American magicians without kind of historically getting an idea of why does it look this way. It comes through this storyline that the Greeks learned from Egypt, and then the Romans learned from the Greeks, and then the Romans took it all out, and we ended up here. And I know I'm running through history very quickly, so for the historians, just hang in there. All right, so how was it looked at in Greece? In Greece, magic was very conflictual. Some people thought only poor people did it. Poor people, slaves, and women were looking for spells and casting spells. But then other people thought it was a valid place of understanding what we now call chemistry and science. And keep in mind, well, I'm skipping ahead of myself, but there's an influx of information coming from outside of Greece, coming through Kemet, Egypt, and they're trying to synthesize this and understand it. So it had a mixed review in Greece, but you didn't really have witch burnings and things of that nature. That's going to come much later down the line. Rome also saw it conflictually. You don't see magic attached to certain gods or goddesses, but it was a political thing.